Hello there and welcome back to thealgorithmistoxic.com. In my last couple of videos I've been focused on the battle between Google, Facebook, the Australian government and its regulator, the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission. I've made the point that the Australian government's proposed regulations of Google and Facebook look clumsy and like a bit of a misdirection of regulatory effort. Today I want to talk about an area of big tech that's in urgent need of regulation, and that is the enabling of scamming on Google's advertising network. That's a very high bar that Google CEO Sundar Pichai set for himself and for Google when he spoke to US Congress. From where I sit, it's a bar that neither Google nor its CEO, Mr. Pichai, are anywhere near reaching. Here in Australia, I have seen over the last 3 months a scam that's been constantly served up by Google, and I was still seeing it as recently as last week. To understand this scam, you first have to understand that Google is a massive supplier of advertising. Google's reach extends way beyond YouTube and its search pages. It's very likely when you're looking at any website, there's a very high chance that the ads you're seeing on that website are being supplied by Google. It's a very important point that the general public tends not to understand. Over the last 3 months or so, I've been noticing a scam that uses a number of people, but in particular, I've noticed the face of Dick Smith, a famous Australian entrepreneur, to promote a Bitcoin, what looks like a Bitcoin scam. And the ads feature Dick Smith's face and a classic sort of libertarian kind of message. And when you click on the ads, they take you through to a fake version of the ABC website. The ABC is Australia's national broadcaster. It's the most respected news provider in the country. So when a fake version of that website is likely to snare a lot of people. And Google is directing, so this scam involves an ad that Google places on all kinds of websites. I've seen it on prestigious publishers in Australia. I've seen it on websites like CNN, Washington Post. And you can actually check on an ad and see who's supplied it. And I've checked and Google is the supplier of this ad. So when you click on the ad, you go through to the ABC, the fake ABC news story, and then you get links to this scam. I don't know what happens if you keep going, but I've read in some of the news coverage of this scam that people have been ripped off tens of thousands of dollars. So just think about this. Google has an advertising product where it negotiates, finalizes a deal with scammers who then perpetrate a scam against the Australian people, and Google is profiteering from that as well. What kind of a break in common sense would allow this to happen without massive criminal prosecution? It would seem that Google is an enabler of these scams and that the company is profiting from them. I tried to call Google in Australia to chat about this, but had no success getting through. Google is totally contemptuous of the idea that it should ever be held to account, either by governments or by just public opinion and the general public. That its refusal to ever engage in a conversation tells you almost as much as you need to know about the sort of corporate character of the company. That's one scam that I've noticed over the last few months here in Australia, and it hasn't gone away. I've seen variations of this scam across the year here as well. It doesn't end there though. Over the last 30 years or so, I've worked mainly in the travel industry as a travel publisher, but I've also worked in travel companies. I also co-own a cafe and a little boutique travel company, and those businesses have all been in Southeast Asia. During my time working in travel, I've had a great opportunity to look at the impact, the influence of big tech on the industry. Travel is big business on the internet. The stakes are very high. There's a lot of money at stake. And so scamming can be very lucrative. And Google is once again right there enabling the scamming of consumers. In the scam I want to talk about now, the ads are run on Google's pages, so on Google search pages. And these are, it's kind of appalling that Google can get away with doing this. There's so much you could talk about, but let me just show you what happens. So the basic way this scam works is that scammers create fake airline websites and they create fake airline URLs on the internet, and they buy ads on Google, and then they basically, when someone searches for the airline, so in the examples I use, one is a Vietnam budget carrier, a big budget carrier in Vietnam called Vietjet. A bunch of companies have created fake websites and fake companies for Vietjet, and they buy ads off Google, and they are the most prominent. So if you do a search for Vietjet while you're in Vietnam, particularly if you're a Vietnamese person in the Vietnamese language, these websites, these fake websites, are at the top of Google search. Now, the likelihood that someone will click on those is very high. One, because it's very hard to pick the difference between ads and organic search results. And two, because you don't even think about it, you just click on the top link. But in the case of this airline, the top links are Google sells them to scammers. And again, Google is profiting from scammers. Even Vietnam's national carrier, Vietnam Airlines, has been scammed. And once again, Google is there to enable that scam. We hear a lot about AI and how fabulous it is and the incredible sophistication of Google's AI and how it enables all kinds of fraud detection. Well, Google, if you are not able to stop this kind of scamming with your sophisticated AI, what does it mean? Does it mean you don't care enough to deploy your AI against these scammers? Perhaps. So while I've expressed some skepticism about Australia's plans to regulate Google and Facebook, it's not because these companies are not in need of urgent regulation. The punishments for scams like this should be severe, and Google and Facebook will very quickly fix them. It's an appalling reflection on Google, but it's an appalling reflection on government and regulators that they sit by and watch as these companies defraud. By enabling scammers, they defraud their populations. It's astonishing to me that this has been possible. Thanks very much for joining me. Head over to thealgorithmistoxic.com for a closer look at these issues, and we will talk again very soon. See ya.